but first and foremost, kind of being a consultant, having that curious approach and just wanting to find out more about their situation and the property, but more so kind of figure out their situation, why they're even entertaining your offer in the first place. That's very important.
Yeah.
And then, pretty much just everything you said, I would echo, but maybe a couple things to add so I don't just do that. I would say for negotiating on price, one thing I like to do, which is similar to what you just shared, but let's say, there's a five or $10,000 gap between your max offer, what you came up with, and their lowest price they're saying they're willing to take. One thing I like to do is just come up in smaller subsequent jumps, if that makes sense. And so let's say they're at 20 and I'm at 10, for example, 10,000. And let's say, you ask them that, what would you consider somewhere in between? Like, I know we're kind of close here. I want to make a deal work with you. Let's say they come down, for example, maybe like 16,000 or something. So what I like to do is instead of immediately like splitting that gap with them, I might come up to like 11.5 or 12, and same thing you just said, make it kind of feel like it's a big jump to come up that high for you, and kind of further solidify what you've already talked about. Maybe there's certain repairs you talked about the property, mention those to them again, and kind of what am I looking for? Just re-emphasize why your price is what it is. But then let's say if I came up to 11.5 first and they came down to 16 in this example, let's say they come down like another 2,000, for example, and now they're at 14, I'm at 11.5. Now, instead of making another $1,500 jump, I do half or less of what I did the first time, if that makes sense. So I would come up maybe only $500 this time. Like, man, I really don't know if I can come up any higher, but I do like the partner thing. We could do that also. So it could be a follow-up call where you're doing this, or you could like put them on a brief hold or something. And then come back and jump up, like I said, a little bit smaller next time. So maybe you only come up to 12, maybe you only come up another $500. And a lot of times that works because they might jump down the same amount they already did, but you are only coming up a little bit. And if you do that a few times, you might have come up like 3, 4, or 5 times, but all in, maybe you only came up 5 grand and they came down 10 or 15, for example. So you don't want to like win the negotiation, you want to make it a win-win for them. But in that case, I've noticed that it's easier to stick to your kind of max allowable price when you're doing smaller jumps like that, rather than jumping up 5 each time. And that adds up real quick.
Yeah. And then it becomes an expectation from them too. Like, well, he just came up 5, so I came up,
Exactly.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you make it like really arduous, like, oh man, I don't know, man, it's just really tough because we already
Yeah.
have a lot of expense to do on this, and we got some unknowns in there. Like, there's some things that are just uncertain. We don't know how much it's going to cost. Like, whatever. That's all helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And I know we're kind of talking about offer follow-up, but just on the initial offer, another thing we like to do that I'm sure you guys do as well is just giving a very specific offer. I've noticed that really
Yeah.
helps when you're giving out offers. Instead of giving out 50,000, for example, give out 48,525, for example, like something like that. Just give out a very random number that makes it appear like you did your research, even though you did, but just don't give out that full, like, a round number. Like, give out a random number, and that really helps. I've noticed. Just like I said, make it seem like you've really stretched your dollar and tried to come up with an exact figure for this person. So I think that helps with psychology.
It's a great
Um,
point. Yeah.
yeah, and then also when they come to an agreement, I found it's very important to kind of pull away when they give you that acceptance. And especially like you said, like if they come down to a price that works for you, don't jump on it, like you already said. But let's say you guys agree on price on the phone. It's very important to kind of do some sort of pull away there, like just before you even send them the contract. Just like, are you sure? Like, is there anyone else you need to talk to before we go through with this? Are you like, do you want to do some more research on your end? Have you come back to it if you didn't do this earlier in the conversation? Come back to this where you're like, hey, have you ever thought about listing this with a real estate agent? Like, it's probably going to be your best option to get top dollar for this property, and kind of come back to maybe some of the things you talked about earlier in the call, and just re-solidify their commitment to you. Because if you don't do that before, I've noticed a lot of times that does come up along the road when you're trying to close it, and then they might back out, they might ghost you, and it might cause problems down the road. So I found every time that we do that, and we kind of do let's a slight pull away before we actually commit, send them the contract. That really helps too. So I would definitely recommend that. And
Even like the
then
blankets one, we do this sometimes, is like, is there any reason you can see yourself changing your mind or backing out of this contract?
mhm.
It's like, oh no, I would never. And then that goes into a psychology piece of like, when a person says they would never back out, or they're not that type of person, then it's a lot harder for them to back out later on because they've already said that they wouldn't do it, or they're not that type of person.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great one. And then just going back on another thing that you said. which is when you do get that price agreed to, a lot of times we like to do the if then type statements where it's like, if we can come up to this, then do we have an agreement today, for example? And you already touched on that, but I think that's very important because then it's not committing on your end yet. You're like, if we can come up to this price, whatever price they said they would accept, can we get it signed today? I think that's very important because it's the same thing you just said. Then they're giving you a verbal commitment right there.